Hi, this is Guitarist Denis Taaffe. I'm in my home studio. And newly reissued my 44th album called Iwato. Modern Rock Guitar, Volume 44, Iwato. Now, what is Iwato? Iwato is a Japanese scale. And every track on the album, I used the Iwato scale. And this album, I have to look this up, hold on a moment, was actually released originally was released in 2006. And it was my 29th album, released for 2006, and my 46th album overall. Now, if you take a look at the cover, photo is actually a monkey, right? And this was actually a photo that my friend Chuck Terrell actually took. He took the photo of the monkey. He was in Thailand and took that photo and sent it to me. And I used it as an album cover, and it fit perfectly for the Iwato concept for this album. Very much an album. I really like this album. Another thing I remember is that at the time I was writing a instructional column for a guitar magazine called Guitar Connection, is that what it was? Anyway, it became Premier Guitar. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Premier Guitar, but I wrote an instructional column called Practice Up for about 6 years, and I think this was right in the middle of it. And I, in fact, did a column on the Iwato scale, and so I thought, well, if I'm doing a column on the Iwato scale, I might as well do an album using the Iwato scale. And so you'll hear it here in a lot of the tracks. And let's take a listen to some of those. It's actually a long album. It has 16 tracks, and it's 71 minutes, 16 seconds, and it's loaded up. And so let's take a listen to the very first track called Bushido, using the Iwato Japanese scale. And I think this is just kind of an introductory track. I think I used samples. I was in this period. I was heavily using samples and drum samples as well. Let's take a listen. Here's the intro. Yeah, that little keyboard part is definitely a sample, and then the drum samples. Cool intro for an album, though. Yeah. In fact, I don't think I played anything on that. And that's not uncommon, believe it or not. I'd often create these little loops, things as intros to the album, right? As the very first track is just an intro to the album. So that kind of opens the album up. Now, let's get to actual tracks where I actually played something. Would be nice. Okay, number 2, Empires. We go to Empires. guitar, distorted, those are looped. The bass guitar is emulated, bass on guitar, and that's looped as well. The drums are drum samples, which I had just switched to from old drum machines to using drum samples. And just in case you didn't know what a drum sample was, it's someone actually playing the drums, a small component, and you loop it to create a drum track. Besides the clean guitar, you also hear the backwards guitar. And backwards guitar is where you play the guitar part forwards, but when it plays back, it plays it backwards. And when you loop that, it creates kind of a music bed in the background. Kind of, it's not a real strong melody, but it fills kind of the background. You'll hear it here. Yeah, right there. Yeah, that's all backwards. Alright, let's move ahead. And of course, these were recorded live, improvised on the spot in the studio. I just play them live in the studio. 2 tracks for drums, left and right. 1 track for bass, and then 2 tracks, left and right, were guitar and guitar loops. And that was basically my setup there into a Roland recorder. Okay. So moving on to track 3, of course, Iwato, the name of the album. So obviously featuring the Iwato scale. So let's try that. Very interesting, the bass, emulated bass part, which is just guitar dropped an octave to sound like bass and then looped. And you'll hear the bass part there is basically the Iwato scale. I'm just going up the scale. And there you can hear it. I like this track very much. Okay, I'm kind of moving through these quickly because there's, 16 tracks. Okay, the next one is Dynasties. Let's hear about that. Still using the Iwato scale. So they all have this kind of a Asian flavor, every track, in a way, mixed with some rock. More pentatonic type things. Okay. And I like the guitar, the clean guitar sounds. And very much the drum tracks, I think, fit well. all the drum tracks they're real crispy on this album, and it fits quite well. Okay, moving on. Still the same track. Let's forward a bit. About 3 minutes in. There's that backwards guitar again. One thing to note is the Iwado scale doesn't have that many notes in it. So, a lot harder to come up with bass lines and melodies and so on, when you're working with less notes than a traditional, like a pentatonic scale or, a natural minor, Ionian, so on, Dorian. A lot less notes than that, so it's a lot harder to find them, to find song ideas too. Okay, number 5, the Demo, or Daimyo. Yeah, obviously I looked up Iwado on the Infopedia and got other names that were remotely remotely similar, to the Asian kind of idea behind this album. Okay, so here's the Daimyo. I like this track because it's simple. It basically has the guitar swells for chords, right, using the Iwado scale. And then you can really hear in the soloing that I'm using the scale, the Iwado scale. You can hear it here. Here we go. Yeah, and that track, remember I was learning the Iwado scale and how to use it, and then at the same time I'm recording this album, and that's that one track where I felt I'd really learned to use it a lot better than some of the earlier tracks. Especially when I had to write a column about it too, for the guitar magazine at the time. Okay, so number 7, Emperor Status. Now this track is interesting because I'm actually using the old drum machines, and you can hear them. They're there, and they're kind of a washy sound. And then the drum samples, which are a lot clearer and they're more in the forefront. So I kind of try to mix them together. And to sync them, you'd use MIDI, the musical instrument digital interface. And you can sync them up so that they'll be in time with each other, which is what I did here. And then I would mix them onto 2 channels. Okay. Yeah, you can hear the real strong drum samples, and then in the background, the drum machine's going. Skip ahead. Playing guitar solo. What I like about this album, and especially this track, is more musically mature than some of the previous albums and previous tracks, especially guitar solo wise and so on. Okay, number 8, Geishas. Okay, now here, remember I told you I was using a lot of samples. And here's a sample with kind of a vocal. It's a woman singing. And kind of odd, and I put it in there. Let's hear that. And really, if you hear it by itself, she's not a very good singer at all. But anyway. And now notice the bass line only has 2 notes. Remember what I told you? The Iwado scale doesn't have a lot of notes in it. So it's very typical that I would find a bass line with only 2 notes, and that's one of the reasons why. So let's hear that again. Notice too, same thing with the drums. I got the old drum machines, right? Kind of with this wishy-wash. And then in front I have a drum sample, kind of this clack, clack, clack things to try to give the drums, besides the drum machines, try to get a more realistic sound. Let's hear that. Okay, also notice guitar-wise, I think that's funny, is I'm actually recreating the pitches of, that vocal sample. You'll hear the guitar. You'll hear it here. Let's play that again. That's kind of funny. Okay, not this part, but then she sings wah, wah, wah. Right there. solo sounds so strange because it's using just notes from the Iwado scale, and as I told you before, there aren't that many notes, so you have to do a lot of moving around the neck, that kind of thing. It's funny to hear it now, but back then I was consumed by it. And really, it's kind of inventive. I realized the creativity it took to create, like, just even that track is very interesting to me because I definitely had a clear vision. And what's strange is that vision, the musical vision, changed over time, and it's still doing it to this day, For all I know, I might, my style might evolve into something else again, Okay, anyway. Moving on, number 9, primates. Okay, it makes sense. There's a chimp or whatever it is on the cover, right? So, of course, it's primates, according to simian law. I saw a Planet of the Apes movie. I thought it was very funny that the monkey was telling another monkey, well, we have to follow simian law. Okay, anyway, number 9, primates. Let's hear it. Okay, definitely another kind of experimental track using the Iwado scale, so not too many notes there. And I have no idea what that audio sample is of the sound. I don't know. It sounds like electricity or something. Why that's there, I don't know. It was just I had all these different sample sounds to use, and for me it was like a kid in a candy store. It's like, my God, you mean I can just throw these samples in? Wow. Thank God I got away from that. I mean, I took it to the absurd limits, believe me. Well, like that first track, I didn't even play on it. It was all audio sample. And that's fine for an intro, but I think one of these albums, like number 54 or 55, it was an experiment, and it was nothing but samples, of audio samples. But I did a regular album where I was actually playing at the same time. It was kind of for fun. Okay, so let's take a listen here. Okay, and the drums are only drum samples. A lot cleaner than having the drum machine washy background. By using the Iwado scale, it also got me playing these really exotic chords, that were kind of almost dissonant, really. But they would fit in the context of using that scale. Interesting. Definitely that Iwado scale right there. Alright, number 10, let's move on. Number 10, origami. course. You know origami, right? The paper folding, into little freaking animals or whatever. You always see that. It's origami. Let's try that one. That's me trying to solo using just the Iwado scale. And the other thing is, I realized that this track is actually part of a longer track that's somewhere else on the album. I'm not sure where. And it's actually the same track, but I cut it because one track didn't have the solo. And this is kind of like the extended version with the solo. But it's just the solo part. And you can hear, it's basically a long guitar solo. In fact, if I fast forward it. And this, for me, was really hard because I could only use the notes from the Iwado scale. There aren't that many of them. And I had to avoid all other scale notes and patterns I'm used to playing, for the solo. And so it came out with these really strange kind of note patterns I wasn't used to playing at all. Fades out like that. Okay. Number 11. The Kimono. And I think this is probably one of my favorite tracks on this entire album. And the reason why is that I kind of was able to mix the Iwado scale and make it more rock-like at the time, from what I remember. And I used a sample of a sound where it was kind of like a synthesizer type sound that just goes sound effect. There we go. So let's take a listen to that. Yeah, real simple melody. There's the synthesizer sound. Super simple. If I had been playing in a band at that time, it probably would sound something like this, right? Simple kind of rock things with some added guitar stuff. interesting. Here's the clean delay part, and I do the clean delays now a lot. I mean, I use that a ton. But here it was just kind of in its infancy, so it didn't quite fit timing-wise. It was pretty close, I guess. The other thing I noticed is that that's actually a drum machine. That's not a drum pattern or a drum sample. But I left off the Zoom drum machine so it wasn't as washy of a sound. Because that Zoom drum machine had cymbals, and the cymbals were crazy. They were like... so this is without them, I believe. There's that delay. And let's keep forwarding. Okay, another solo. So there's that track. I like it because it was kind of a fun track to do. Okay, here's one called Bamboo. Okay, sounds like it's going to be a guitar solo extravaganza. I remember this was supposed to be the Iwado scale. Well, this track, from what I remember, is trying to mix or incorporate the Iwado scale with more pentatonic and blues kind of scales. On each album, I would always put a guitar track, kind of for guitarists, you know, not for the average listener, you know, which was just always technique, playing, soloing. It's okay. Back then, I was all into that, but I don't know, as I got older and matured, it just didn't do it for me. It's kind of like, it's not very musical, I guess. You know, I think maybe when you're younger, you have to, or you want to, prove that you can play guitar, and so, you know, when you solo, well, there's your chance. Show off techniques and stuff. But if you're honest with yourself, you realize, oh man, it's not exactly very musical. All right. Let's fast forward a bit. Let's fast forward. to my ears, this kind of thing is more musical than the guitar solo thing. I don't know. All right. Number 13 is Tokyo. Back to the Iwado scale. And you see by this point, after doing all those other tracks, I got pretty comfortable using the Iwado scale, a lot more than in the beginning. So it started to incorporate it into my playing, especially solo. Okay, this is a fairly short track, it's 4 minutes. Backwards guitar again, and clean guitar. Yeah, definitely experimental guitar. I like the sounds used. Now, number 14 is Katana. And 9 minutes long. Let's hear that. Now here I used I used an audio sample. It was a sound effect, and well, quite frankly, to me now that I hear it, well, it sounds. I always get an idea of like somebody hopping on a bed, you know, like a kid jumping on a bed up and down, you know, hitting the springs, and you can hear that kind of. And there's the drums with the zoom, washy drum sound. Notice the bass sound doesn't have many notes in it, right? I even had to put in a filler note. A fill note, it's one where you can play it, it's not wrong, but if you don't land on it, you just, as a passing note, you know. Because there were so few notes to play. Alright, let's fast forward a bit. About this track is that for 9 minutes, I didn't just resort to a long guitar solo. You know, I tried to find parts that would work well with the track. Maybe I spoke too soon. The other thing is, sometimes the notes sound like they're wrong notes, but they're the correct note in the scale, but maybe not the best note to use, and I would run into that a lot, especially as I was learning to use the scale. And here, another thing is timing. Between playing solos and then going right into the rhythm, especially when it's improvised like that, you really have to think very quickly on there. And I remember that was hard for me to do because my timing was so crappy to begin with. So this was a definite step forward in that sense. Definitely influenced by the band Rush. That's a very Rush kind of thing. We'd play the chord and then the open strings. See, combining the chords and then switching, playing a solo part of fill, that kind of thing, and then going back to the chord in time was difficult for me. And so any chance I'd get to work on it, I'd throw it in here. Also remember trying to make sure each note is very clear, I think early on, especially early on in my playing when I was doing sweep picking type things, it was very easy to skip, or not even skip notes, but to play the note, but it was sloppily played, and so you would not hear every note really clearly. Whereas here, I think I definitely tried to work on that. Okay. Last track. No, I'm sorry. 2 tracks to go. Way of the Warrior. Okay, kind of like the Bushido. Way of the Warrior, let's hear that. Now remember the very first track, if we go back to that and you hear that little keyboard sample, this one. Remember I told you I didn't play on that track? Well, I used that keyboard sample again where I actually played on it, and it's here. Right here. So here I've added the simulated bass on guitar and actual guitar playing with the audio sample. a solo you can hear every note. Whereas it used to be really sloppy. Whereas here you can actually hear each note clearly. More clearly, anyway. Okay, last track is kind of an exit track called Edo. I would assume that probably means end or something like that. Okay, let's hear that. Ah! Okay, here you go. This is the just guitar with playing the Iwado scale. And I would try to incorporate that into playing other arpeggios and scales, patterns. That was the idea. Instead of just playing the Iwado scale by itself, is having it, mixed with other more common scales that I used. Like right there, that wasn't the Iwado scale, right? That was kind of a natural minor scale run that I always do, but mixed in there is the Iwado. And you can tell when I'm playing the Iwado scale, I'm going da-da-da, playing every single note, because I just learned it. Good way to end an album. So there it is. That's Modern Rock Guitar, Volume 44, Iwado, created in 2006. And for me, it was a great way of learning the Iwado scale. I don't use it very often, but I suppose I do a little bit. But I really like the feel of this album, And I was definitely, I had a focus for what I wanted it to be, sound-wise, and I think I accomplished that. Certainly some of the drum sounds could have been much better. Well, you can critique forever what could have been better, I guess. But for me, it was a very interesting album because I was able to use an exotic scale that I hadn't used and that most people don't use. At least in Western guitar, if there's such a thing. And it really helped me to focus in on a certain kind of sound and things, and so I always really liked this album. And it's the same kind of thing. It was in print, available if you like. for a couple years, and then the company who put it out abandoned all their entire music department, and all those albums became unavailable from one day to the next. And unfortunately, they never let me know anything about it. And that was really sad for me, that I created this album and I wanted it to be available. If anything, even just for myself. So to be able to reissue it now and know that it's going to be there for a long time is great. It's great. And it lets me go back to memory lane, I do remember working on that album and learning the Iwado scale and being so frustrated because it had so few notes. And that I had to learn it and then write a column for it, And I mean, if you go to Premier Guitar, which was, I'm trying to remember what it used to be called. I thought it wasn't Music Connection, but it was Guitar Connection or something. I don't know. I remember my column was called Practice Up. And I remember I have a column on the Iwado scale. It was while I was making this album and learning the Iwado scale. So it was something very different and fun for me, to try something different. And so that was my vision then, And what's really fun for me anyway is having done a lot of albums, from 1 to 246, is seeing the evolution of my playing, and also the maturity of my playing, not only of my playing, but musicality wise, if that makes sense. More focus, more detail, and evolving, changing, And for me, one of the hardest things is the guitar solos. I don't know. I'm just so not into that anymore, really, I mean, it's fun to play, but not very musical, really. I think it's just a chance for guitar players to show off their technique, I don't know, I guess maybe that mattered to me at that time, when you were younger and you want to prove yourself guitar-wise, but if you're really honest with yourself, you can't say it's very musical. Not really. I mean, I'm sorry. Even a player like Eric Johnson, I mean, I love Eric Johnson's playing and so on. But even a guitar solo is just not very musical, Unless you're playing, a melody or something like that. But when I was younger, I thought, well, if a guitarist can't solo, well, he's sad. He's no good, that kind of thing. And I don't know, I guess as I got older and maybe my ear, musically matured a little, I realized that that's not the case at all, It's a musical part of the things that makes a lot of sense to me. I think a great example of that is Andy Summers. I mean, if you listen to the entire Police catalog of the Police, he's maybe played 3 or 4 tiny solos, you know. And yet, I mean, I thought he was a great guitarist. I mean, I loved his, his ideas on the songs like Every Breath You Take and Message in a Bottle and so on. Those guitar parts are great. And yet they didn't involve, super intense soloing and things. And, I mean, it's fun to play, I guess, but I don't know, at some point you've got to really be honest and fess up that it's not always very musical. So, if you hear my albums from, I'd say probably 200 on, there are very, 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 very few solos, especially distorted guitar solos. And don't get me wrong, they're not. I mean, it's not that they're bad. I mean, my God, I listen to a guitarist like Randy Rhoads with Ozzy Osbourne, super distorted guitar solos, and they're fantastic. There's a guy who, and yet even his solos a lot of times aren't very musical. However, they fit the song so well that if they weren't there, something would be really missing. So, good question. I guess styles change, or maybe just your interests change musically over time as you get older, I guess. Alright, so this was Modern Rock Guitar Volume 44, Iwato. And it was used, all the tracks were done using the Iwato scale in one form or another. Okay, that's it. See you next time.